What is the craziest real-life plot twist story you have? Story 1. I was best friends with a neighbor kid growing up. He was always over at my house or I was at his, and I had a major crush on him pretty much since I was old enough to walk. But it never seemed like he liked me back or that I even noticed that I liked him. So we grew up, he started dating people, and I was jealous as hell over it. I started dating people while still pining over him. I figure he just sees me as a little kid, I was a year younger than him, or a little sister, and nothing will ever come out of it, so I try to put my feelings aside. Then, when he turned 16, his family moved out of state and we lost contact. I got over my feelings and time moved on. Fast forward a few years later, and we reconnect online, start talking, and then this dude casually mentions in a conversation about how he had a giant crush on me growing up and always wanted to ask me out. He tells me that he even asked my mother for permission to ask me out, and she said no, so he never ended up doing it. My mom never told me about this at all. My mind is blown. My entire childhood of pining after this guy, my first ever crush, feels like a lie. At this point, I'd long since put aside the feelings I had for him and kind of gotten over the crush, but I still felt a lot of residual nostalgia from being 15 and craving Tool for the first time in my life. He was still into me, and I was debating whether I wanted to start something with him or not, mostly so I wouldn't have to live with the what if of it all, tossing the idea around while we kept in touch. Then suddenly, he stops messaging me. I'm like, because our talking was going well, and I didn't think I did anything to make him want to start ghosting me. I message a mutual friend of ours and ask if she knows what's up, and she tells me the guy was arrested for beating a dude who owed him money to termination. He's in prison right now serving a life sentence. I never got that Tool. The end. Somewhere your mother is smiling at her decision. At first, I was so mad at that mom for just doing what she did and not telling her. That is just awful, but the way it worked out, I'm sure that this woman is going to keep this information about the guy from the mom so she doesn't go into a perpetual loop of I told you so. Story 2. First roommate in college was super Catholic and did not approve of my older boyfriend. As an attempt to save me, she thought of inviting me to her friend's celibacy celebration while I was doing homework in the Commons. A chill wind picked up, and I sensed it was time for me to leave. As I turned around, I saw the only doorway blocked by a circle of people holding hands and quietly chanting, "No spicy until 30! No spicy until 30!" As I approached to try to break through the circle and get the hell out, their chanting got louder. I eventually got out, but this chick threw away all of my high-end spicy toys and S-Girl, a certain type of girl, self-unaliving girl book. Can't say that word. I was done with living with her and got out after just a quarter. A year later, a few friends and I were comparing horror stories about roommates we've had, and I shared my story. A new friend told hers about a super noisily self-stimulating lesbian. None of the others had much to say, so they voted between the two. Mine won by a small margin, only to find out both of our stories were about the same roommate 1 year apart. Oh, also, she did not throw out my spicy toys or my self-unaliving girl book. This is a perfect example of Shakespeare's "The lady doth protest too much, methinks," or the more modern, "He who smelt it dealt it." Side note, it's better to be an outspoken lesbian than a hypocrite. I saw the twist coming as I was reading it. I was hoping that was it, and it's just, in a way, it's just kind of karma. That's kind of a long con to go through just to get at someone else's spicy adult toys. Story 3. Used to play an online browser game back in 2003, 2006-ish. The game itself wasn't really great, but the community was what made it work. Got to know a lot of people from my guild, and we had an IRC channel that I was one of the main regulars on. Another regular there was a guy from a different country, though also in the EU. We became kind of good online friends, but after we stopped playing the game, contact became increasingly scarce before petering out completely at some point. By then, we did have Facebook and friends, but we never really talked. 2 years ago, in a nostalgic moment, I decided to hit some people up again from that game. See if we can have a sort of reunion thing or something. Maybe. I send a message to the guy, and our conversation went something like this. Me: "Hey man, long time no talk. What's up in your life these days?" Him: "Oh hey, I live in your country now, with my girlfriend I met online." Me: "That's funny. Whereabouts?" Him: "A town that's literally 10 minutes driving away from me." We talk some more, and the subject of work comes up. He then tells me he works in a different city about 20 minutes further. The city he names is where I was born and where my mother works. I ask him where exactly, and the place he names is right across the canal from my mother's business. Literally a stone's throw away. Funnily enough, I still haven't met him because we fell out of contact again right after that due to other things going on in our lives. But we plan on meeting up sometime soon. Had they ever talked about where he lived before? I don't know if they had mentioned that before. It might not be so much of a coincidence that he ended up where in this guy's hometown, because it was probably kind of in the back of his mind. But cool that they're able to meet up again. Story 4. My dad was adopted as a baby because his parents were both teens from Catholic families. They were promptly sent to boarding schools across the country from each other, and that was that. Many years later, my dad was researching his genetics to look for potential hereditary health problems and decided to put out a search for his parents. He eventually contacted and met with them separately, but both his mom and dad also got in contact with each other. As it turns out, they both had grown kids and deceased spouses. So they decided to meet up and eventually started dating. About 5 years ago, my brother and I went with my dad to a family reunion where we discovered his parents were once again in love and had invited both of their families to my grandpa's farm for a big weekend party. I met close to 100 people I was somehow related to, including dozens of cousins and several aunts and uncles. It was all thanks to my dad that these two huge families came together and made new connections. So he, along with my brother and I, were treated like celebrities all weekend, and everyone wanted to get to know us. My dad's adoptive mother perished over a year ago, but now he has two new parents who are relatively young and extremely interesting people for him and my family to spend time with. We go skiing at my grandpa's condo in Montana and enjoy summer activities at his huge farm property in Alberta. The whole experience taught me that you're never too old for a new love, and I'm happy to be able to have grandparents for many more years to come. Whoa, that blows my mind. Sounds like something that only happens in a Hallmark movie. Story 5. When I was 5 years old, I remember going to a wedding reception for one of my friend's older sisters. I vaguely remember that it was scandalous that she was young, 18, just graduated high school, and he was much older. That's all I knew, and it didn't come up much in conversation with my friend or their family. 10 years later, I'm in high school on the debate team, just chatting with the coach about random stuff when we get to talking about the team before he was coach. He told me that before him, another teacher was the coach who got kicked out for having a relationship with one of the students on the team. He told me the names, and my jaw hit the floor. That was the wedding reception I was at. Story 6. The husband of an elderly couple near me perished about a year ago. The wife, for most of her adult life, had a pretty serious drinking habit, and her husband kept her on track. A month or two after his passing, she found someone new off the internet. He quickly moved in, but something wasn't right about him. He'd often be seen buying multiple bottles of vodka and whiskey and taking them home with him. He was doing this every 1 or 2 days. Anyway, soon after, the police came asking people in the local area to see if anyone had seen the elderly woman and her new partner, as they believed they had recently got married. This could be because if she was to perish, her nice house would be left to him now. He kept buying alcohol for presumably her until 2 police vans, an ambulance, and crime scene investigators were seen outside the house. No one has been seen in or around the house since. At first, I thought he was trying to terminate this poor woman off through her drinking habit, but got fed up and tried to unalive her so he could have the house. But according to neighbors, she unalived him to stop the apparent abuse he'd been putting her through. She's apparently in a secure unit now, where she will most likely stay. Okay, that was a twist if I ever saw one. That one I did not see coming as I was reading it, but the woman is really brave and she's strong enough to defend herself. I really hope it turns out that she would get released for self-defense. I don't think she deserves to be in a secure unit. She deserves to be back in her house. Story 7. I'm 80% sure my uncle faked his own passing. The facts. One day, his coworker calls up my grandparents to say, "Hey, your kid is passed. His wife already cremated him and there's no service. You don't need to do anything. Just thought you should know. We can't find a termination certificate. There was no obituary. He hadn't contacted anyone in the family for something like 7 years, so this was all out of the blue." Yep, sounds like he faked his passing. I don't know if you're in the U.S., but if you are, the clerk's office in the county he perished in should have records related to this. His will/estate being processed, etc. could shed some light. Story 8. Not a plot twist per se, but I met a guy online a few years ago, and we started hanging out and became good friends. In 2016, he got a Facebook message from a young man telling him that he was his father. He gave his mother's name, and sure enough, my friend had slept with her a few times around when he would have been conceived. He showed me the young guy's Facebook page, and there was a picture of his mother who looked very familiar to me. I looked at her profile, and sure enough, it was my best friend from my older sister. She had a kid when she was 16, and he lived with my best friend for a couple of years, and I would babysit him quite a bit. I have about a half dozen photos of me with him when he was a baby. Story 9. I taunted my little sister her entire life about the fact that she looked nothing like me and our dad. I always made "you're adopted" jokes about her and stuff. It became an inside joke between us. I'd tell her we found her on the doorstep and she'd say, "Oh, thank deity, that means I'm not actually related to you." My parents kind of frowned at it because it was mean, but my sister could take a joke and she knew I was just teasing her. She joked about it herself. Found out a couple years ago that she was the product of a short-lived affair. My dad accepted her as his own, and my parents kept it a secret from everyone. They told her last year. I still make "maybe you're adopted" jokes about her, but they're 100 times funnier now. For me, the twist is I was expecting that they stop making jokes because they stopped being funny. I hope they're 100% funnier for both of them now and that they keep riffing off of it. I mean, talk about there being some truth in the joke. Story 10. I had a one-night stand when I was 18 because I was curious. I didn't like it and decided to never bother again. Anyway, I was at a nightclub one night after that and trying to buy a drink at the bar when I happened to look around and saw a guy that looked like the guy I had had the one-night stand with. In order to check, I snottily asked, "What's your name?" And he answered with a different name. It was a different guy. Ended up marrying him. My boyfriend of 2 years broke up with me, and I was pretty upset, but I got asked out on a date and said yes, thinking I was ready. I was wrong. I had a miserable time. Couldn't hit it off with this guy, even though he was trying. Anyway, he took me to a concert on the other side of the city, an area I'm not familiar with and never go to. On the way home, I'm feeling sad and text my ex, which was lame, but I did it. My date thinks something is wrong with one of his back tires and pulls over into an apartment complex. It's 1 a.m., dark, and I take little notice. While he's outside fiddling with the tire, I get a text back from my ex basically telling me he wished he had never met me and to leave him alone. At this point, I'm trying not to cry and realize how big of a mistake it was to go out that night, and in general, just feeling depressed AF, thinking I'll never be happy again. I tell the date guy I'm sorry, but I'm not ready to be in a relationship again. The night ends. Cut to 2 months later, I finally feel like I'm moving on and trying online dating. I hit it off with the guy I'm talking to. We met up and had a great time and started dating. The first time he brings me back to his place, it's nighttime. I'm looking around the outside of the apartment complex and can't shake the familiar feeling I had been there before, which didn't make sense because this was 45 minutes from where I lived and not an area I ever went to. On the second night, we leave using the back gate, and it hits me. This was the same apartment complex the guy had pulled off into earlier on that date. I go, oh my deity, I almost had an emotional breakdown right here. Long story short, I married the new guy, and we've been together for 10 years now. I know it's just a coincidence, but I find it crazy that of all the apartments in Houston, we stopped at the one my future husband lived at. He was literally feet away from me while I was in a car having one of the lowest moments in my life and feeling like I would never find someone again. Right place, wrong time. That's cool, though. So glad you ended up with him. Story 11. I've grown up hearing about my Cherokee ancestry from my dad's side of the very southern family. One of my cousins has gone on a spirit journey and has spent a good amount of time researching his Cherokee heritage and connecting to our familiar roots. The 2-minute version of the family story tells how a patriarch of my family met the woman of his dreams and moved out into the forest to live like a true Cherokee father would. He left the rest of our family behind. Several years ago, my grandma got very into Ancestry.com. As they researched our tree, they found that we actually had no Cherokee blood. However, my great-great-great-grandma was a black woman. I think that's enough great. It makes me so happy to think about my racist uncles and extended family finding out that we are 0% Cherokee and that my generation is 1/16 black. The further you go up my family line, and the more racist my family, the more black we are. I love it. Apparently, this is really common among Southern families. They told people their tan was from being part native as opposed to black. It was most accepted.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 12. I used to have a friend named Tiffany in middle school. I wasn't so good with people and I was a little rough around the edges. I was very jealous because she was incredibly dainty and feminine while I was a begrudging tomboy. In middle school, her very sketchy and violent father withdrew her from classes and we lost contact. She was homeschooled for a while, and then she and her mother escaped to a battered woman's shelter and set up a new life in Kentucky. I learned all this from the grapevine. I found her mother, brothers, aunts, and uncles on Facebook, so why couldn't I find her? Over the course of 2 years, I searched every few months for her online, desperate to reconnect and apologize to the friend I had such intense jealousy for, and explained that I was unintentionally rude because I envied how feminine she was, while I felt like a brick wall of a girl. Finally, one day, her mother replied to my friend request, and I found out the reason that I could never find her name on Facebook. He goes by TJ now. Too long didn't read? Old friends reconnected. Ace Ventura pet detective moment ensues. Oh, thank deity, I thought you were going to say she passed. Story 13. Summer of my sophomore year of college. Was friends with this girl who was in high school with me, and we decided to start dating. It was a summer thing while she was back in the local area, and we decided to cordially break it off when she went halfway across the country to school. We remained friends. Not close friends, but friends. 15 years later, her mom married my dad. They had both lost their spouses at a relatively early age, and they happened to meet and fall in love. So the girl I used to date is now my stepsister, made for a heck of a toast we both made at the wedding. Story 14. We were at a college fundraising event, and our friend Dom was desperately and obnoxiously hitting on any female in sight during that time, including me, but anyways. There was one girl in a hat who started hanging out by our group's table. To prevent Dom from coming on strong on Hat Girl, and so she didn't feel uncomfortable by Dom, my friend told him she was gay. Dom left her alone. Fast forward a few days, and friends, including Dom, are sitting at lunch when Hat Girl comes and starts talking to one of the girls at our table, and somewhere along the lines, Hat Girl said to female friend, "Stop it. You know I'm gay." We had no idea she was actually gay, so we were perishing when that happened. The real plot twist in this comment is how I thought Hat Girl was a typo for that girl. I was questioning the functionality of OP's T button. Then I realized. Story 15. Coworker breaks up with a bartender and starts pursuing me. Tells me the ex has been stalking him and won't leave him alone. He makes a point to publicly call out the bartender at work for being weird and tells her to leave him alone. We started dating and things are cool for a few weeks. Then he invites me over for a small party, and oddly enough, the ex is there, so I keep my distance from both of them as I have no idea what the heck is happening. A few hours in, the ex changes into pajamas, and I realize he got back together with her at some point and never told me. The next day at work, I found out he told everyone that I tried to seduce him and make him cheat on the bartender. They all believed him and treated me like garbage for months after that. His behavior towards me got scarier in and outside of work, and I couldn't tell anyone because I was the lying boyfriend stealer. I never knew depression before this fiasco. Tell everyone. Show receipts. Story 16. There was this guy when I was growing up who I would call Uncle Jerry. Never knew why. I just assumed it was one of those he's super close to the family, so he's your uncle kind of thing. Finally, at the age of 20, I found out he was my dad's uncle, which was surprising because they're 2 months apart in age. There's no real twist here, I guess. I was just a dumb child. My friend's niece is 3 years younger than her. It's funny to see people's reactions when she tells stories about partying with her niece at carnival or out at a club. Story 17. My friend moved from Phoenix, Arizona to a small town in Florida called Satellite Beach. We walked into a pizza restaurant one day, and he stares the dude working there straight in the face before sparking conversation with him. It turns out they lived in the same apartment complex before moving, and both happened to move across the United States to end up living miles away from each other. Really shows how small the world is. Story 18. Mom and Dad started separating. Dad was devastated and Mom wouldn't tell him why. Mom finally confesses she's in love with a woman who was my high school teacher and also my ex-best friend's mom. Think that actually gave Dad some closure since he realized it wasn't his fault. Dad and I moved out together, lived happily for a year. Then he passes away suddenly, and I had to move in with my boyfriend, who left me less than a year later for his best friend. Lots of plot twists. Story 19. My uncle went through a bad divorce a few years ago when his then-wife came out as a lesbian and left him for another woman. He was extremely heartbroken and devastated. Then, a few years after that, he revealed that not only was he gay, but he had a serious boyfriend the entire time he was married. The reason the divorce hit him hard was because she was able to finally be honest about who she was. But he didn't think our conservative Catholic family would accept him. When he finally did come out, though, the general family reaction was, "Oh, that explains a lot." Story 20. I heard there was this couple who could not conceive kids, but their neighbor had like 3. They couldn't afford artificial insemination, so the guy approaches his neighbor and asks him to impregnate his wife because they really wanted a kid. The neighbor obliges. For months, no pregnancy. Finally, the neighbor's wife admits to the guy she cheated on him to get pregnant and ends up firing blanks. So afterwards, this guy who wanted his wife to get pregnant ended up suing the neighbor for breach of contract. I'm not sure what happened after that. What the ever-loving hell? Story 21. One of my buddies was living in a dorm at uni his freshman year. A couple weeks in, His stomach was hurting constantly as soon as he would wake up in the morning, and he decided he should go to the doctor's. The doctor asked him what his daily diet consisted of, and my friend tells him he always drinks a protein shake right before bed. The doctor says to quit drinking the shake before bed and see if it helps. So my friend didn't drink the shake that night and went to sleep. He wakes up to his roommate trying to take off his pants. It turns out my friend's roommate was putting illicit substances into his protein shake so he could physically violate him while he was out. The substances are what was upsetting his stomach. Story 22. I know someone in the healthcare field. She told me a story about how a woman tested positive for an STD, and my friend suggested that she bring her partner in to be tested as well. The next day, the lady comes in and brings her boyfriend to be tested. Then the lady tells my friend to wait a minute, and this younger male walks in. She says she couldn't be more than 15 and hands the lady what appears to be keys. He then hugs the boyfriend. My friend thinks he was in the car and needs to have parking validated. She said it happens more often than you think. Nope, the kid was there to get tested as well for sleeping with his dad's girlfriend. Friend had to report it. I don't know what came of it, but that's some weird stuff. Story 23. Moved across the country in June 2013. Still kept in regular contact with my family, mostly mom on the phone or Skyping or whatever. Everything seemed normal, nothing big going on. Got a call from my brother, who still lived at home, in March 2014. Turns out that almost the whole time I'd been gone, my mom had been talking to a couple different guys behind my dad's back and was leaving that day to go stay with the one she wound up with. No one ever mentioned any kind of marital problems to me. I still talk to everyone from time to time, but my brother hasn't talked to my mom since. Even extended family got a little shook up by it, from what I've heard, and things just aren't the same. Story 24. When I was 15, I started dating my male friend after he asked me out. We've been fairly close for a long time, and a lot of our friends said we should get together, so it kind of felt inevitable. He ended up breaking up with me after a few months, and I was sad for a while, but we stayed friends, so in the end it was all chill. However, whilst we had been together, we were never really affectionate in public, or at all, which was down to my insane anxiety. And a rumor started that we were each other's beards, i.e., we were both gay but pretending to date each other to cover it up. Laughed it off at the time because I knew I was straight, but deity damn if it isn't 3 years later and he's got a boyfriend and I'm away from home lusting after uni girls. Well played, rumor mill. You called it. Story 25. From my own life. It's a small one, but a ridiculous coincidence. 2012. I'm in a bar being chatted up. We're telling funny stories, so I tell the long story of how I ended up almost in a fist fight with a minor celebrity in 1999. I didn't know that the woman I'm talking to had done acting as a teenager, and I definitely didn't know that she had played the same minor celebrity's on-screen girlfriend in 1998. Story 26. When I was really little, I fell off a jungle gym and had a shard of metal go into my head. Shortly after, I pricked myself on a syringe in a car park. Many trips to the doctors for antibiotics and whatnot. They noticed my scab on my head turning color. Scratched it off, pulled out the metal. If I hadn't pricked myself on a syringe and gotten all the antibiotics and stuff, I would have gotten brain damage and expired. Too long didn't read? Sharing needles saved my life. Story 27. My girlfriend of 2 years moved a couple hours away to go to school. We saw each other most weekends. The weekend before Valentine's Day, we were together and it was great. The next weekend on V-Day, I go to see her at her parents' home. I see through the window as I walk up to the house, her and her fiancé are showing her parents an engagement ring. Story 28. Plot twist. My mom's second husband, whom she swore had perished in a car accident, was actually still alive and living in Africa. I talked to his brother on the phone after randomly finding his name in a list of numbers while I was working as a scam telemarketer. My life is insane. Story 29. My boyfriend was pressuring me to have a threesome with a woman I kind of knew. I had never done anything with a woman before, or had any attraction at all to one, and I ended up not going through with it. He kept encouraging me to spend time with her to get more comfortable with the idea. So I did. Then I left him. For her. Story 30. Lose my virginity in a one-night stand in college. 9 months later, we became neighbors because I moved into the first-floor apartment and she moved into the second-floor apartment. I got to 9 months later and expected a different plot twist. Story 31. My friend got robbed, and it turned out to be his uncle conspiring with his cousin's boyfriend. No one saw that stuff coming. That's some M. Night Shyamalan tier stuff right there.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.